to this now. Afriforum and Solidarity are continuing their mission in the United States of America. The two Afrikaner organizations have been criticized for using false information to lobby the U.S. government under President Donald Trump. In their latest memorandum, Solidarity accused Pretoria of being hostile in its foreign policy towards Washington. They also want the U.S. government to assist them with a special zone infrastructure to settle Afrikaners in a concentrated manner in South Africa. Well, joining us now is Nicole Fritz, Campaign for Free Expression Executive Director. Nicole, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. Just what you make first of the latest episode where we saw people from Afriforum engaging officials in the United States of America. What do you make of this particular step or move?
I think it's disturbing. There's no question that South Africa faces grave challenges. It just seems bewildering that we would have organizations within civil society that are playing to a campaign of disinformation and misinformation around South Africa. And I would say not only endangering South Africans, other South Africans who they may not identify with, but ultimately, I think, in endangering their own self-interests and the interests of their children. The idea that we don't all fare better in a multiracial constitutional democracy, but rather seek to appeal to strongmen on the international stage, is a very concerning direction and development.
I mean, of course, they have an ear that's, or ears maybe I should say, that are prepared to listen in the form of President Donald Trump, and I dare say Elon Musk as well, who themselves have been distorting information about South Africa. And so your Afriforums are really exploiting an opportunity that they know actually exists.
I think that that's right. I mean, the question is whether, they really have the ear of Trump and Musk, and whether, those individuals are, acting in anyone's best interests other than their own. I mean, what we've seen are actors that are entirely expedient, right? So what is interesting is that Solidarity's memorandum, what they're calling the Washington memorandum, identifies as its first point of concern South Africa's foreign policy, and the idea that South Africa has somehow aligned itself with interests that are antithetical or hostile to those of the United States. And among those actors that it lists as South Africa having aligned itself with is Russia. Now, of course, in the last week, we've just seen the US in an entirely unprecedented fashion undertake this massive and fundamental realignment so that it is, in fact, acting in concert with Russia. So in this historic UN vote, just in the last couple of days, we've seen the United States and Russia act in a coordinated fashion in order to try and defeat a resolution that would have condemned Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the invasion into Ukraine. And so again, I mean, the idea that Solidarity is making this journey to beseech Trump to act on their interests, and ostensibly because South Africa is running this foreign policy that is hostile to the United States, and identifying Russia as one of the actors who, which it identifies as hostile, when the US has just fundamentally aligned its position with that of Russia, would say to Solidarity and Afriforum require that they undertake a fundamental rewrite and rethink of the points that they suggest are ones of concern.
Donald Trump stated, among other things, recently that there's a bad situation in South Africa where the radical left media doesn't want to mention a massive human rights violation at a minimum, it's happening for all of us to see. But what I'm getting at is, to what extent are we all, or have we been complicit? And I'm talking about us as the media, but also people like you who are in the free expression space, in how we have, for example, referred to or called your Afriforums civil rights organizations, and actually entertains their thoughts and campaigns, including, of course, misrepresentation and lies?
Well, I don't know that there was a fundamentally different way in which to engage those. I mean, I do think that their approach now is deserving of fundamental criticism. And I would ask them whether they seriously believe that they and their children are better off in a country in which they believe an expedient, at best, actor like Trump is going to come to their rescue, rather than vesting their interests and their efforts and their energies in looking to safeguard and uphold our constitutional democracy. Because essentially what they're doing in appealing to Trump in the way that they are is essentially saying, have no regard to our constitution, to our sovereign nationality. And my argument to them is, if you have concerns, and let's admit, all South Africans have genuine reason to be concerned about our government, about the unemployment we see, about the extent of poverty, about the extent of crime. But the idea that white Afrikaners are suffering a particular persecution is entirely nonsense. That's not to say that they don't have reason for grievance, right? But the responsible way in which one deals with that grievance is engaging with the elected authorities of this country, not seeking to bypass them and asking for the intervention of a strongman who, as I say, is entirely expedient. I mean, both in principle, that is wrong, and that is entirely in contravention of what we as citizens and inhabitants of South Africa commit ourselves to. But I also think in their self-interest, it's entirely nonsensical, because you cannot believe that your interests are better secured in South Africa, an ocean away from the United States, by the likes of an expedient Trump, rather than real, deliberative, conscientious engagement with your fellow South Africans and those who have been elected to lead South Africa. So I think whether on principle or expedience, it just makes no sense what they're doing.
It's not a question of, hey, by any means necessary. Besides, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
As I say, it may be that this is a knee-jerk reaction, but the tragedy of this is that their actions are creating harm, I think, for fellow South Africans. And they may say, well, at this point, we're only looking out for our own self-interests. But as I've tried to argue, that even their narrow self-interests, I think, are harmed by this course of action. There's no way you can seriously think that Trump, an ocean away, is going to secure some idea of self-rule in South Africa. But I also think what they're doing by undertaking this high-profile campaign of disinformation is inflaming the hatreds, the division, the intolerance in South Africa. It's only fomenting the fractures that it is going to make it potentially more difficult for us to live in peace. And so I would say what they are doing at the moment is fundamentally irresponsible.
Nicole Fritz, thank you so much for your time.